I got pregnant at 61. My husband left me out of shame, and I was left alone to raise our daughter. I found out I was pregnant in early October. The leaves were just starting to turn yellow, and the air smelled like coffee and cinnamon in the mornings. Our autumn ritual with Tom. We lived a quiet, measured life. Our children had long since grown up, and our grandchildren visited us on holidays. I had almost stopped thinking of myself as a woman capable of anything new. Life seemed like a finished book, with only the last page left to flip through in memory. And then, 2 words on the screen. You're pregnant. At first, I decided it was a mistake. A pharmacy test could have been wrong, of course. I laughed, shaking my head, but a strange feeling grew in my chest. Not anxiety, no, excitement. I checked again. Then I went to the clinic, and I came out with trembling hands and a completely new heart. I was 61, and inside me, a second heart was beating. When I told Tom, he didn't react right away. He stared at one spot. Then he asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded. He stood up, walked around the room, came back, and didn't say a word. A couple of days later, he started saying strange things. What will people say? You're not young. It's shameful, indecent, ridiculous. And then one evening, he just packed his things, not loudly, not dramatically, as if he were going to stay with a friend for a week. I need to think, he said, avoiding my eyes. He didn't come back. I was left alone, with weak hands but strong determination, with a body that already knew fatigue, but with a soul that suddenly remembered what a beginning was. I didn't blame him. I didn't curse him. I just kept going, day after day, step by step. And somewhere deep down I knew this path was mine. And it wasn't the end, as I had thought. It was a second birth. Mine. Pregnancy at 61 is not at all like what they write about in magazines or what my friends tell me. It's not about pink bows or photos with round bellies in the sunset. It's about silence, about the rustle of nighttime thoughts, about the whispers of doctors who glance at each other but smile to your face. It's about how you learn not to be afraid of your own reflection, not because you've grown old, but because you've changed. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, stroking my belly, which wasn't even round yet, and thought, can I really do this? Will my hands, which so often shake in the morning, be able to hold a baby? Will my heart, tormented by loneliness and silence, open up again to cries, diapers, and endless nights? I didn't know, but I wanted to believe that I could. People, they looked at me differently. At the store where I bought prenatal vitamins, the cashier barely glanced at the package, pursed her lips, and said nothing. At the pharmacy, the pharmacist asked twice, "Is this for you?" At the post office, my neighbor Martha, with whom I used to exchange baking recipes, noticed that I had rounded out a bit and squinted with interest. I didn't answer. I wasn't going to convince anyone. It wasn't their path. It was mine. And those who hadn't walked it couldn't and shouldn't judge. My body tired quickly. In the morning, I woke up feeling heavy, as if I had been carrying sacks of flour all night instead of just sleeping. Sometimes I would go out to buy bread and stop halfway, clutching a bench. My heart was beating fast, my breath was uneven, and passers-by walked by without noticing the life beating inside me. Small, weak, just as stubborn as me. At the ultrasound, when I first heard the heartbeat, tears flowed freely. Even the doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, paused for a moment with her hand on my wrist and said quietly, "You are strong, very strong." At home, I didn't turn on the TV anymore. There was shouting, accusations, competition, fear. I lived in sounds, the rustling of leaves, the noise of the kettle, the sound of footsteps on the floor. I talked to myself, to my child, to the air. I learned silence not as loneliness, but as a new form of presence. Sometimes I took out an album with photos. There were pictures of me and Tom, our children, holidays, birthdays, trips. I didn't burn those memories. They were part of me. But now I was learning not to dwell on them, because there was a new face ahead, A new name, a new soul. I didn't know what to name the girl, if it was a girl or a boy. I didn't choose a name from trendy lists. I just put my hand on my belly and said, "You are. That's enough." And, as if in response, something stirred inside me, as if to say, "I hear you." Sometimes in the evenings, I would turn on the music, old songs, the ones I listened to when I was young. The Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel, Carly Simon. I sang softly, in a whisper. No one heard me, only the baby, only God, only me. I no longer dreamed of being the perfect mother. I just wanted to be a real one, and I knew that even if no one understood, even if Tom never came back, even if my family shrugged their shoulders, I wouldn't back down, because inside me, two hearts were beating, and both were alive, and both needed to be accepted. I hesitated for a long time before telling them. Every time the phone rang and the name of one of my children appeared on the screen, I felt my heart sink. They were already grown up, with their own families and their own concerns. And how could I explain to them that their mother, who was well over 60, was going to be a mother again? It sounded almost absurd. I thought maybe I could hide it, maybe wait. Maybe the baby and I could manage on our own somehow. But deep down, I knew that hiding the truth meant betraying myself. And if I was fighting for my right to be, I had to start by being honest. I called my first daughter Emily. She had always been the most level-headed, practical, and straightforward. I chose a simple phrase. I need to talk to you. It's important." She arrived the next day with coffee in her hand and a hint of anxiety in her voice. "Mom, are you okay? Are you sick?" I sat her down at the table, looked into her grown-up, tired eyes and said, "I'm pregnant." She froze. Her face went through a series of expressions, first shock, then confusion, then fear. "You, what?" "I'm expecting a baby, Em. I'm 3 months along." "But how?" Just like that, no real explanation. It just happened. And yes, I'm in my right mind. And yes, I've decided to keep it. She was silent for a long time. She looked at me, then at the window, then at her cup. "What about Dad?" she asked quietly. "He left." "He left you because of this?" I nodded. Then she suddenly stood up, walked around the table, and without saying a word, hugged me. Long, softly, truly. "You've always been stronger than all of us, Mom," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't understand right away. It's unexpected. But you're not alone." I couldn't help but cry, and she stroked my shoulder, just like I used to stroke hers when she was afraid of thunder at night. "We'll get through this," she said. "We're together. If you've chosen this path, I'll be there for you." "Thank you, sweetheart. Just don't tell your brothers yet. I'll tell them myself." "Okay. But know this. I'm proud of you. And you're still my mom, no matter what your life is now." When she left, I sat down in a chair and stared out the window for a long time. I was a little scared, but now I knew for sure I wasn't completely alone. And sometimes, to become a real mother, you first have to open up to your daughter. Talking to my sons was much more difficult. Emily is a woman, a mother. She understood almost immediately. But Michael and Jonathan, I spent a long time choosing my words. I knew it would be harder for them, not because they were cold or indifferent. It was because they had grown up in a world where everything had to be logical, normal, and age-appropriate. A mother who became pregnant at 61 did not fit into this mold. I decided to start with Michael, the older one. He had always been rational, businesslike, and precise. He arrived in a suit with a tablet under his arm, as if he were going to a meeting rather than coming to my house. I made coffee and put almond cookies on the table, his favorite since childhood. He ate silently while I talked. No emotion, no surprise, no laughter. He just looked at me intently, and that was it. "And you want to keep the baby?" he finally asked. "I don't just want to. I can already feel it. It's life, and it's my choice." He put down his cup, leaned back in his chair, and folded his hands. "Mom, I respect you. But do you understand how risky this is? Your health, your finances, everything. I understand everything, Michael, and I'm ready. I'm not asking for help. I'm just sharing. He nodded. It was clear that he couldn't accept it, but he didn't want to judge me either. Okay, if that's what you need, I won't stand in your way. Just be careful. He stood up, kissed me on the cheek, and left. Carefully, distantly, but he kissed me nonetheless. In the evening, Jonathan arrived, the younger one, the one who had always been closer to my heart. He brought a warm blanket, pumpkin pie, and his usual easy smile. Emily told me, he began from the doorway. At first I thought it was a joke, but then I got in the car and drove to you, just to hug you. He hugged me, tightly, until I cried. Mom, if you feel like this is your destiny, I'll be there for you. I'll help you. I don't know how, but we'll get through this. It's strange, but it's beautiful. You're giving life when others have given up. I didn't answer. I just took his hand. We sat there silently, looking out the window, and I thought, how wonderful that love has no age, neither maternal nor filial. And that night, I slept peacefully for the first time in a long time, because now my truth was part of my family. Some people didn't understand it. Some didn't accept it right away, but each of them took a step toward me, and that's already a step forward. I went to the clinic 3 weeks after the test. All this time I had been putting off the visit. I was afraid to hear something like, "It's impossible. It's a mistake. At your age, it's nonsense." But deep down, I felt that no, it wasn't a mistake. It was real. My feelings were quiet but clear, like the whisper of the wind, which cannot be doubted. I made an appointment online, indicated my age, and when the girl at the reception desk looked at me, her eyes widened slightly. "Are you here to confirm your pregnancy?" she asked, as if expecting me to say, "Oh no, you've made a mistake." "Yes," I replied calmly, "for an ultrasound and tests." I was called into the office. The doctor was young, in her early 30s, wearing glasses, with precise, tired movements. She held my form in her hands and looked intently at the screen. "Marilyn, 61 years old?" she asked cautiously. I nodded. She paused, then smiled politely. "Unusual, but not impossible." "I think so too," I replied. "That's why I came." We did the ultrasound. I lay there, not breathing, staring at the blurry shadows on the screen. And then suddenly, "There," she said. "Do you see it? A tiny heartbeat. Very faint, but it's there." At that moment, I couldn't hold back. Tears welled up in my eyes. I looked at that tiny rhythm, and it was as if I could hear the voice of life saying, "You're not crazy. It's all true. Anything is possible." The doctor took off her gloves and said a little more softly, "I know it won't be easy, but from a medical point of view, you have a chance. We just have to monitor it closely. Very closely." I nodded. I stood up. As I was about to leave, she suddenly added, "You know, my mother is 63. Sometimes I think she has more energy than I do. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But if you feel you can do it, go for it." "Thank you. It's important for me to hear that." I left the office breathing deeply and evenly. I wasn't shaking anymore. I walked down the hallway, each step filled with determination. I was still afraid, but now I had confirmation. A second heart was beating inside me, and there was at least one person in a white coat who could hear it. I thought long and hard about whether to go. Classes for pregnant women seemed like a place for young, flexible people with trendy water bottles, cloth backpacks, and magazine-perfect bellies. But the doctor said breathing, stretching, and calmness would help. I signed up, tentatively choosing the daytime group. It seemed like there would be fewer people, and it might be calmer. I took off my shoes, laid a mat in the corner, and began to slowly repeat the movements the instructor was showing. My whole body seemed to be screaming, "You don't belong here. You're a stranger." But I didn't leave, because I felt that this was where I had to go through this journey, through embarrassment, through unfamiliarity, through awkwardness. In the second week of classes, a woman approached me. Her dark hair was beautifully streaked with gray, and her face had those soft wrinkles that don't make you look old, but give you a wise expression. "Are you Marilyn?" "Yes." "I'm Lorraine. I sit one mat away from you. I'm not a young mom either, 48. After decades of trying, it finally worked out. We talked for a long time after class. She didn't ask unnecessary questions or try to be supportive. She just shared. We laughed about stretching, about how tired our legs were, about how strange it was to be the oldest person in the room. And there was more acceptance in that laughter than in any sympathy. Since then, I looked forward to these meetings. We drank tea after practice, shared notes, and read excerpts from old books to each other. We had different stories, but a similar feeling. We had stepped outside the boundaries of what was acceptable and expected, and we were freer for it. And then one day, as I was getting ready to go home, Lorraine said, "You and I are like that, Marilyn. It's as if life has transplanted us into a new pot. We're not young sprouts, but maybe our color is the strongest. You just have to wait for it." And I realized, I'm not just a mother. I'm proof that life doesn't ask how old you are. It just goes on. When I entered the room, the floor was covered with blue mats, and it smelled of lavender and something like eucalyptus. The instructor, a young woman with perfect posture, nodded politely. The other participants were women between the ages of 20 and 30. They were wearing leggings and headphones, some with phones, some with books. No one recognized me, and no one was waiting for me. A few glances did slip my way. I was wearing a long knitted sweater and carrying a cane, which I had brought just in case. They didn't look at me with malice, but with puzzlement. "Are you lost? Are you here for your daughter?" I could read in their eyes. I took off my shoes, laid a mat in the corner, and began to slowly repeat the movements the instructor was showing. My whole body seemed to be screaming, "You don't belong here. You're a stranger." But I didn't leave, because I felt that this was where I had to go through this journey, through embarrassment, through unfamiliarity, through awkwardness. In the second week of classes, a woman approached me. Her dark hair was beautifully streaked with gray, and her face had those soft wrinkles that don't make you look old, but give you a wise expression. "Are you Marilyn?" "Yes, I'm Lorraine. I sit one mat away from you. I'm not a young mom either, 48. After decades of trying, it finally worked out. We talked for a long time after class. She didn't ask unnecessary questions or try to be supportive. She just shared. We laughed about stretching, about how tired our legs were, about how strange it was to be the oldest person in the room. And there was more acceptance in that laughter than in any sympathy. Since then, I looked forward to these meetings. We drank tea after practice, shared notes, and read excerpts from old books to each other. We had different stories, but a similar feeling. We had stepped outside the boundaries of what was acceptable and expected, and we were freer for it. And then one day, as I was getting ready to go home, Lorraine said, "You and I are like that, Marilyn. It's as if life has transplanted us into a new pot. We're not young sprouts, but maybe our color is the strongest. You just have to wait for it." And I realized, I'm not just a mother. I'm proof that life doesn't ask how old you are. It just goes on. It happened early in the morning, when the sky was just turning gray and I hadn't had time to make tea yet. I was just bending down to get some cereal from the bottom shelf when suddenly, a sharp, pulling pain in my lower abdomen. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Then another flash of pain, weaker but more alarming. I sat down on the floor, clutching my stomach, unable to breathe. My head was spinning, my throat was dry. My first thoughts were frightening. What if... I didn't finish the thought. I didn't dare. I called the clinic. My voice was shaking like when I was a teenager and was afraid to tell my parents that I had run away from a party. The secretary said to come in immediately. I called a taxi and drove there, clutching the pendant on a chain that Tom had once given me. Back then, he hadn't left yet. I sat in the waiting room with my head down, avoiding the gaze of the other women. I, strong, intelligent, mature, suddenly felt small and lost. The doctor came out quickly. It was the same one with the kind eyes who had seen me at my first appointment. "Marilyn, let's be careful. Everything will be fine. We'll take a look." It was quiet in the ultrasound room. Only the flickering of the screen and the ticking of the machine could be heard. The doctor looked for a long time without saying a word. I clenched the armrest of the chair so hard that my knuckles turned white. "There it is," she finally said. "The heartbeat is normal. The baby is moving. Everything is fine." I exhaled sharply, not even realizing that I had been holding my breath the whole time. Those were spasms, tension. "You may have overworked your muscles. You need to rest more." "And the baby?" "Everything is fine." I promise. I nodded and cried, not out of fear, but out of relief. Because at that very moment, I realized that I was no longer alone, not mentally, not physically. This wasn't just pregnancy. This was already my baby. I was afraid of losing him the way you're afraid of losing something too precious, too dear. On my way out, I saw a woman in the hallway. She was with her husband. Her belly was big, and she was laughing. I looked at them and suddenly felt no envy. No, I felt that I too could be happy, in my own way. Not as a couple, not with the support of a man, but simply because I am alive, and there is another heart beating inside me that will beat no matter what. I returned home slowly. I did everything quietly, carefully. I brewed some chamomile tea. I stroked my pillow. I lay down and placed my hand on my belly. "We'll be fine, little one. I promise." And it was as if he responded, with a slight movement, barely perceptible, but alive. I stood at the entrance to the store and couldn't decide whether to go in. The window was filled with soft blankets, bodysuits with rabbits, and booties the size of walnuts. Above the door hung a garland. "Welcome, future moms." I flinched. I didn't know if I could go in. It was as if I was standing on the border between reality and some kind of fairy tale world where only young, radiant people with no wrinkles under their eyes and husbands taking pictures of them at the checkout were allowed. But I went in. I just stepped inside, and immediately I felt the air fill with the smell of vanilla, talcum powder, and plastic. Everything seemed too bright, too delicate. I felt like a stranger, awkward, too big and too grown up. I walked past the racks, ran my fingers over the tiny costumes and thought, what if it's ridiculous? What if it's absurd? A woman my age choosing a hat with ears. She was surprised, but she didn't judge me. She smiled. "So we're both special. You know, I think children don't come on time. They come when we're ready for them, even if we don't realize it." We talked for a few more minutes. She left first. I stood there, clutching the romper suit in my hands, and suddenly I felt calm, light. I didn't care what anyone thought, because I wasn't just buying something. I was buying a little piece of the future, a future in which I would be a mother again. The saleswoman at the checkout was silent. She just rang up my purchase and handed me the bag. "Very nice choice," she said quietly. "It's for the most important person in my life," I replied, and I walked out onto the street, with the bag, with new confidence, with a light breeze in my hair and the feeling that I wasn't just walking home, I was carrying love home. People were watching. The saleswoman, a young girl with pigtails, smiled demurely, but I could tell she wanted to ask who it was all for. I took my time. I just looked. I stopped at the cribs. I remembered how, more than 20 years ago, we had chosen a crib for Emily. Tom insisted on a white one with carved legs, although I wanted a simple wooden one. We argued, laughed, then drank cocoa. Everything was simple. Everything was then. Now everything is different. I picked up a gray jumpsuit. It was soft, with little bare ears. At that moment, a woman approached me. She was about 45 years old. She was dressed simply, but tastefully. She looked at me intently. Cute, isn't it? She said. I got one just like it. Is it for your grandson? I asked hesitantly. No, my son. I'm 47, 9 months. I was taken aback. She smiled. Yes, I know. Everyone looks, everyone thinks, but I don't care. He's my boy. And he came to me when he was supposed to. And you? I'm 61. She was surprised, but she didn't judge me. She smiled. So we're both special. You know, I think children don't come on time. They come when we're ready for them, even if we don't realize it. We talked for a few more minutes. She left first. I stood there, clutching the romper suit in my hands, and suddenly I felt calm, light. I didn't care what anyone thought, because I wasn't just buying something. I was buying a little piece of the future, a future in which I would be a mother again. The saleswoman at the checkout was silent. She just rang up my purchase and handed me the bag. Very nice choice, she said quietly. It's for the most important person in my life, I replied. And I walked out onto the street, with the bag, with new confidence, with a light breeze in my hair and the feeling that I wasn't just walking home. I was carrying love home. Pregnancy at my age is not something that passes by unnoticed. It is not a backdrop to life. It becomes life itself. Every day is like a small stage. Every morning I wake up with a new feeling, a new body, new thoughts. My back hurts, my blood pressure rises, and sometimes in the evenings I feel so tired that even words become heavy. But none of this is a burden. It's as if an internal compass is constantly reminding me, you are moving forward. You are going where someone is waiting for you. I started going to bed early, as if my body itself decides when to turn off the day. Pillows are now everywhere, under my lower back, under my feet, under my neck. I found a comfortable armchair that used to stand in the corner, and now I start every morning in it, with a warm blanket, a cup of tea, and my hand on my stomach. Sometimes I feel slight nudges, not strong or sharp, but as if someone is tapping with their finger from inside, saying, I'm here. Eating has become a real ritual. I stopped eating random things and stopped rushing. I cook vegetable stews, bake oatmeal cookies, and make compotes, just like when I was young. I try not to listen to scary stories on the internet or Google every symptom. I chose a doctor I trust, and every visit to her is like a little holiday. We smile, listen to the heartbeat, measure blood pressure, and every time I think, one more step, one more week, we are together. Of course, there are days when everything falls apart, when my side hurts, when I have no strength for anything, when I don't feel like a mother, just a tired woman who wants to crawl under the covers and make everything go away. But then I hear something inside me shift, and I remember why I'm going through all this. For one look, one hand, one breath that this little person will take when they come into the world. I often have dreams. In them, I am holding a baby. I can't see its face, but I feel warmth, such warmth that I wake up with tears in my eyes. It's not sadness, it's anticipation. I started talking to my baby, sometimes in whispers, sometimes out loud. Hello, my little one. You are already a part of me. Even if you never see me, you have already given me the most important thing. You reminded me that I know how to wait, love, believe, and be alive. We will get through this together. I know it. Pregnancy for a grandmother is not just physiology, it is trust. Between a body that has already been through so much and a new life that is just beginning. It is the silence in which, for the first time in many years, I can hear a heart beating, not just mine. 3 months, the first milestone, the first victory. When the doctor said, "You're entering the second trimester," I nodded as if it were just a formality. But inside me, a warmth flared up. We made it. We did it. No serious complications. The baby is growing. That means I'm living right. I decided that there would be no balloons or guests, but I would still celebrate. Because in life, especially in a life like mine, you have to be able to celebrate even the smallest steps. After all, they are no less significant than grand finales. I went to the bakery, and bought a warm apple pie with cinnamon, just the way I like it. I picked up some strawberries, cheese, and jasmine tea. At home, I took out a lace tablecloth that I hadn't unfolded since last Christmas and placed a vase of daisies on the table. Then I went to the closet. I spent a long time looking through my dresses. I settled on one, sky blue with soft sleeves. It was a little tight at the waist, but I didn't change it. Let it be seen, I'm changing, and that's good. I set the table as if someone important were coming, but this was not a dinner for someone else. It was for myself, for us. I sat down. I cut a piece of pie and poured some tea. I looked out the window, and I said quietly, "We made it. Do you hear me? We did it. I'm proud of you, and of myself too." And at that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt not loneliness, but presence. It was as if the room was filled with invisible light, as if someone invisible had sat down next to me. Maybe it was my mother, or maybe it was me, only younger, the one who had once waited, worried, not knowing how things would turn out. And now I knew. Because I knew the most important thing. Life is worth waiting for. That night, I went to bed in that same blue dress without changing. I didn't want to take off that festive feeling. Because this celebration wasn't outside, it was inside me. The morning was sunny, warm, and slightly cool in the breeze. I woke up earlier than usual, as if my body knew that a special day was ahead. Today, I was going to find out who he was, or she. A boy, a girl, or just a little miracle with a personality we didn't know yet. I made some oatmeal, put on my gray sweater, the one that always made me feel calm, and went to catch the bus. On the way, I caught myself smiling. At people, at windows, at the sky. It felt like this wasn't just any day. It was a threshold I had to cross. The clinic already knew why I was there. The doctor, kind as always, laid me down on the couch and applied gel. The machine hummed. The screen flickered. My heart was beating louder than it had in months. "Ready?" she smiled. I nodded, not taking my eyes off the screen. There was a tiny body, fingers, a tummy, moving legs. "Everything is fine," she said. "The baby is developing normally, active, curious." "Who is it?" I breathed. She turned to me and said softly, "It's a girl." A girl. The echo of that word spread through the room as if someone had turned on the light. I didn't cry. No. I just froze. My chest felt so quiet, as if the world had stopped so that I could feel that I was going to be a mother to a girl again. I went outside, slowly. I was holding the photo in my hands. Inside, I felt excitement and a strange lightness. Everything became more concrete. Everything became closer. It was no longer just a baby. It was a daughter. I was going to have a daughter. And even though I would be her grandmother in age, in essence, I would be her mother. Maybe I won't be able to run after her in the puddles, but I will teach her to bake pies, wrap gifts, and sew dresses for dolls. I will tell her how to be patient, how to forgive, and how not to be afraid of her feelings. I will teach her to be a woman, even if the world says, "You're still little," or "It's too late." And maybe one day she'll say to someone, "You know, my mom was already old when I was born, but she's the youngest at heart of anyone I know." I pressed the photo tightly to my chest, and I went home, down the same street, at the same age, but already completely different. I wasn't going to tell everyone, but rumors, as always, spread faster than you can think, especially if you live in a neighborhood where every step your neighbor takes at the front door is commented on louder than the evening news. First, Doris called, my friend, whom I hadn't seen in 8 months. "Marilyn, I couldn't believe it. But then I heard from Ella at church that you're pregnant?" "Yes," I said calmly, 4 months already. "But you're 61. "Exactly." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "But don't you think it's irresponsible?" I felt my shoulders slump. Until then, everything had been filled with light and warmth. And now someone had poked a cold finger into my heart. What exactly is irresponsible? The fact that I'm going to live? Or that I love someone who isn't even born yet? But you'll be an old mother. The child will be 20, and I'll be 81. And I hope I'll live that long. I hope I'll be there. And if not, I'll still give her everything I can now. I heard that Doris didn't mean any harm, but her voice was full of fear. Not mine, hers. And that's not my fault. The next day, I went out to take out the trash. Mrs. Walsh, our downstairs neighbor, whom we rarely spoke to, was standing at the entrance. "Well, well," she said, looking at my belly, which was already starting to round out a little. "It's a little late for that." I didn't answer. "I hope it's not out of desperation," she added. I looked at her calmly, and suddenly I realized I no longer had to explain myself. I didn't have to prove my sanity to my neighbors, my friends, or my age. "You know, Mrs. Walsh," I said softly, "sometimes life gives you a gift when you've given up waiting for it, and that gift doesn't ask for anyone's opinion. It just comes." She snorted and turned away, and I walked on, lighter than ever. That evening I took out the ultrasound photo again. I placed it on the pillow next to me and said, "Our life together won't be understood by everyone, but the main thing is that we understand each other. The rest doesn't matter." I realized that judgment isn't what hurts. What really hurts is when you stop believing in yourself. And I believed, now more than ever. I decided that the room where the bookcases and old piano used to stand would be hers, my daughter's, my little girl's. At first, it was difficult to even go in there. Everything smelled of dust, time, and memories. Michael used to do his homework there, then it was used to store winter clothes, and for the last couple of years, I just kept the door closed. But now, everything has changed. I opened the window. I let the light in. I started with the simplest thing. I washed the floors. Then I took down the heavy, thick curtains. I hung up some semi-transparent white ones with a delicate floral pattern instead. The sun immediately became softer, and the air fresher. I felt something new appear in the room with every movement. Not a smell or an object, but a feeling, anticipation. I didn't buy any furniture right away. I just moved the old armchair into the corner and put a blanket there. I took out a small chest of drawers and painted it a delicate mint color. I tied ribbons around the handles. Above it, I hung an old painting of a forest with a path where I used to walk with Tom. Let it be. Let my daughter know that there was love here before her. Gradually, I started gathering things. Little booties I bought last week. A picture book, The Little Prince, the one I read to Emily. A box for her first curls. A musical toy sent by Lorraine, my friend from class, who was also expecting a late baby. She wrote, "May your little girl have her own sound of happiness." I took my time. I did everything slowly, with feeling. The room was filled not just with objects. It was filled with soul. I talked to myself out loud. This is where the crib will go. This is where we'll read fairy tales. This is where she'll laugh for the first time. This is where she'll take her first steps. I noticed that I was smiling more often, even when I was tired, when my back hurt. I would get up in the morning and go to that room first thing, as if to an altar. I would look around, and I would understand. Here, within these walls, a new life would grow. So what if the walls were old? So what if I wasn't young? But the love here would be the freshest, the warmest. I sat in a chair with my arms crossed over my stomach and read aloud. It became my ritual. Every evening I read to my little girl the books I once loved myself. Today it was an old collection of stories about animals, with yellowed pages and slightly blurred letters. I was about to turn the page when suddenly, it moved. At first I didn't believe it. I stopped, froze, and placed my hand a little lower. "Do that again," I whispered. "Is that you?" A second later it happened again, more confidently, more clearly. It was as if she was answering, as if she was saying, "Yes, Mom, I'm here." I cried, not loudly, not tragically, I just sat there hugging my stomach and cried, with happiness, with surprise, with the realization that now everything was different. Now I am not alone, even in the silence. From that evening on, I started talking to her every day. In the morning, "Good morning, my little star." After lunch, I told her how my day had gone. In the evening, I sang her lullabies. Sometimes I just lay there silently with my hand on her belly, listening to her move and respond. I told her everything. How scared I was when I saw the 2 lines. How her father left. Not because he was evil, but because he couldn't take it anymore. How important it is to be strong and gentle. How valuable it is to say, "I'm sorry and I'm here." I even told her about my favorite jam, strawberry. Let her know. Sometimes I thought she could hear me. When I told her something important, she moved more. And when I was silent, it was as if she was waiting for me to continue. I told her about the sky, about the rain, about the smell of bread, about my parents, about her sister Emily, about how they would meet one day. I understood that this was not just an intrauterine connection. It was a conversation between souls, and let her grow and grow. Let there be many months ahead, sleepless nights, fears, and worries. But even now, she is my person, my girl, my point on the map that guides me forward. And when I get scared at night, when the shadows on the walls seem too big, I just put my hand on my belly and whisper, "We're together. We're already a family." Time began to flow differently. The days seemed to slow down, but inside me, everything was speeding up. Every step was harder. Every morning began with a deep pause before getting out of bed. My belly grew, and even the softest dresses now clung to me like a cocoon. But I didn't complain. I knew that this was the end of one journey and the beginning of another. I counted the weeks, then the days, and then the doctor said, "It's very soon. Get ready." I returned home and felt for the first time that I was ready. But at the same time, I wasn't. Because how can you prepare for a miracle? How can you know in advance what you will feel when you see the face of the person you have loved for many months without knowing their features? I took a large bag. I spread it out on the sofa and began to pack. Diapers, a bodysuit, cream, a hat, socks, documents, a robe, and a little toy, a bunny I had knitted myself. I put the ultrasound photo in my pocket, let it be close by. "Mom, where have you been so long?" It started early in the morning. I woke up with a pulling pain, similar to the ones I had felt before. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window. It was just dawn, and the birds weren't singing yet. The contraction had passed, but something inside me had changed. Not physically, emotionally. It was as if everything inside me had packed a suitcase and said, "Let's go." I went to the kitchen. I made some tea. I sat down. I waited. 20 minutes later, it started again. This time it was stronger. I froze. My breathing became a little deeper. "It's just practice," I reassured myself. But time passed, and the pain came back, now with a rhythm, with a character of its own. I took out a piece of paper and started writing down the time. Every 15 minutes, then every 10. By noon, I realized, this wasn't practice. This was the real thing. I calmly called the maternity ward. I answered all their questions. They said, "Come in. It's better not to wait." I went to the bathroom, took a shower, and did my hair. I put on a loose dress. I packed a bag. I checked my documents. I went through the nursery one more time. I looked in the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes, they were shining. The kind of light you only see in people who are on the threshold of something new. The taxi arrived quickly. The driver was silent. He helped me with my bag and opened the door. On the way, I looked out the window. Trees swayed in the wind. People walked with bags. Someone was walking their dog. Everything was normal and so important at the same time. I stroked my belly. I said, "Everything's fine, sweetie. We're on our way. I'm here. We'll see each other very soon." I paused for a moment in front of the maternity hospital door. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The start had been given. There was no turning back, only forward, only to her, to my daughter. Time ceased to exist. It broke down into short intervals between contractions and long minutes of pain, where I tried to hold on to anything. The edge of the bed, my voice, the memory of why I was there. They got me settled quickly. The doctors were attentive, although I could see the alarm in their eyes. It's not every day they get a 60-year-old woman in labor. They spoke cautiously, checked me more often, took tests. But I held on. I breathed as I had been taught, and I tried not to think about the fear. The pain came in waves. At first it was bearable, then it became a real storm. At one point I closed my eyes and suddenly saw not a white ceiling, but faces. Toma, Emily, my parents, myself, young, in a blue dress by the sea. I whispered to myself, "You've coped with everything. You've coped with loss, loneliness, betrayal, pain. You'll cope now." Then I went through the rooms. I looked into the empty nursery. It was quiet there. The air smelled of chamomile and paint. I stroked the pillow in the crib and straightened the corner of the blanket. Everything was ready, and yet I felt a tremor inside. Not fear, anticipation. I went to bed early. I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, and suddenly I realized this was my last night in this house before I became a mother again. Not just in theory, not on paper, but in reality. I pressed my hands to my stomach and whispered, "We've come so far together, and tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, you'll be here, in my arms, not inside me, but out in the world. And you, my little one, will never feel that you came too late, because you came just in time, just when I learned how to live again." I fell asleep with my palm on my stomach, and I dreamed that I opened the door and a little girl ran in, sunny, noisy, with eyes like mine. And she laughed, "Mom, where have you been so long?" It started early in the morning. I woke up with a pulling pain, similar to the ones I had felt before. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked out the window. It was just dawn, and the birds weren't singing yet. The contraction had passed, but something inside me had changed. Not physically, emotionally. It was as if everything inside me had packed a suitcase and said, "Let's go." I went to the kitchen. I made some tea. I sat down. I waited. 20 minutes later, it started again. This time it was stronger. I froze. My breathing became a little deeper. "It's just practice," I reassured myself. But time passed, and the pain came back, now with a rhythm, with a character of its own. I took out a piece of paper and started writing down the time, every 15 minutes, then every 10. By noon, I realized, this wasn't practice. This was the real thing. I calmly called the maternity ward. I answered all their questions. They said, "Come in. It's better not to wait." I went to the bathroom, took a shower, and did my hair. I put on a loose dress. I packed a bag. I checked my documents. I went through the nursery one more time. I looked in the mirror. My face was pale, but my eyes, they were shining. The kind of light you only see in people who are on the threshold of something new. The taxi arrived quickly. The driver was silent. He helped me with my bag and opened the door. On the way, I looked out the window. Trees swayed in the wind. People walked with bags. Someone was walking their dog. Everything was normal, and so important at the same time. I stroked my belly. I said, "Everything's fine, sweetie. We're on our way. I'm here. We'll see each other very soon." I paused for a moment in front of the maternity hospital door. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The start had been given. There was no turning back, only forward, only to her, to my daughter. Time ceased to exist. It broke down into short intervals between contractions and long minutes of pain, where I tried to hold on to anything, the edge of the bed, my voice, the memory of why I was there. They got me settled quickly. The doctors were attentive, although I could see the alarm in their eyes. It's not every day they get a 60-year-old woman in labor. They spoke cautiously, checked me more often, took tests. But I held on. I breathed as I had been taught, and I tried not to think about the fear. The pain came in waves. At first it was bearable, then it became a real storm. At one point, I closed my eyes and suddenly saw not a white ceiling, but faces. Toma, Emily, my parents, myself, young, in a blue dress, by the sea. I whispered to myself, "You've coped with everything. You've coped with loss, loneliness, betrayal, pain. You'll cope now." The doctor approached. "Are you ready?" "It's time." I nodded. It wasn't just readiness, it was a challenge to myself. I gathered myself. I breathed. I listened. I pushed. I held on. And then, everything went quiet. There was a cry, clear and ringing. I opened my eyes and saw her. My daughter, small, red, alive. She moved her arms as if trying to grasp this world, and I already knew that it would accept her, because she was born from the truest of things, from love, from faith, from a quiet stubbornness to live. They placed her on my chest. She lay still, breathing heavily and quickly. I stroked her back. I whispered, "Hello, my little girl. I've waited so long for you. You are my best late." And at that moment I realized I hadn't just given birth to a child, I had given birth to a new me. I woke up in the early morning. The room was warm, almost silent, except for someone walking softly behind the door. I was lying on my side in a hospital gown, feeling a little heavy from exhaustion, but without the pain that had accompanied me all night. Next to me, in a transparent plastic box, she was sleeping peacefully. My daughter. The word "my" sounded unfamiliar in my head, like a new surname after a wedding. I sat up slowly, carefully, as if afraid to disturb reality. The nurse looked into the ward. "How are you?" "Like between life and sleep," I whispered. She smiled. "That's normal. You did everything right." "Very well." I asked to hold her. The nurse carefully handed me the baby. She was so tiny, warm, with wrinkled hands and closed eyes. I laid her on my chest and covered her with a blanket. We lay there together. I could feel her breathing. I could feel her heart beating, fast and strong. It was as if she already knew she was safe here. I stroked her back. I examined every little feature, her nose, her chin, the crease behind her ear. I couldn't believe that this person had been inside me, living, growing, moving, and now lying on my chest, completely real. I thought I would cry, but there were no tears. There was only a huge, calm, warm feeling of belonging, as if everything inside me had finally come together as one. A little later, they brought me breakfast. I ate slowly. The baby opened her eyes. They were blue, like the summer sky. She looked past me, not yet focusing, but I still felt like she recognized me. "You're here," I said, "and I'm here, always." I didn't know what to call her. The name would come on its own. I wasn't in a hurry. Today we were just together, without unnecessary words, without the outside world, just mother and daughter, through time, through age, through everything. The house greeted us with silence, not the empty, echoing silence of before, but a new silence, alive, expectant. It was as if the walls were listening, as if the air knew that today it was letting in a new life. I entered, holding the baby close to my chest. The nurse who had helped us check out carried the bags to the door and disappeared, leaving us alone. I put the baby chair on the floor and looked around. The room seemed unchanged, but everything in it had become meaningful. The chair where I had dreamed of her arrival, the tablecloth under which her first booties lay, the chest of drawers I had painted myself. Everything was now for her. I slowly walked around the house with my daughter in my arms, as if showing her, "Look, this is where we'll read, and this is where you'll sleep. This is where I'll cook your porridge, and this is where we'll put flowers when spring comes." I went into the nursery. The crib was standing where it had always been, under the window. I gently laid the baby on the mattress, tucked her in, and straightened the blanket. She didn't wake up. She just sighed deeply, as if she too felt that we were home. I sat down next to her, not taking my eyes off her. How many times had I imagined this moment? How many times had I thought that I might not live to see this day, that I might not make it, that I might not be able to cope. But now all that was behind me. Ahead lay sleepless nights, crying, milk, exhaustion, fear, everything that comes with motherhood. But I wasn't afraid, because she was there with me, and I knew that I would get through it all. Late at night, I went to her crib, took her hand in mine, and whispered, "Welcome, my little girl. You were born at a time when others give up. You came when everything in me was getting old, and you are the one who made me new." 2 weeks have passed since we returned from the hospital. The days were all the same: feeding, sleeping, diapers, quiet conversations with my baby, during which I sometimes lost track of time. And there was peace in that. Gentle, almost imperceptible. I hardly ever left the house. My neighbor brought groceries, and my friend called every evening to see if everything was okay. And I would answer, yes, everything is quiet, everything is fine. And then one day, towards evening, I went to the mailbox. Just out of habit. Usually there are bills, brochures, advertisements. But among the gray envelopes was one that was signed by hand. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was uneven, with slightly slanted letters. I hadn't received any letters from him in many years, and here, my name. In full, Marilyn. I sat down on a bench by the entrance. I opened it. Inside was a sheet of paper, folded neatly, almost with old-fashioned care. "Mary, I don't know how to start. And I probably don't have the right to write. But I am writing. I left because I was scared. Not of you, not of the child. Of myself. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to cope. That I wouldn't be able to be a father at such a young age. That people would laugh. That we would be strangers. I was ashamed. But not of you. Of my weakness. Now I understand that I didn't just abandon the woman who believed in me. I abandoned a part of myself. I'm not asking for anything. Just one thing. Can I see her? Just once. I'd like to try again. If you'll let me. Tom." I finished reading and sat there for a long time, not moving. The letter clenched in my palm, my heart pounding as if I could hear my youth again. I didn't know what to do. I didn't forgive him right away, but I didn't reject him either. I got up. I went home. My daughter was lying in her crib, wiggling her fingers. I leaned over her and said, "You know, your dad wants to meet you." And inside me, for the first time in a long time, there was no pain, no fear. Just the feeling that this story wasn't over yet. He came on a weekday evening when I was putting my little girl to bed. Tom stood in the doorway, a little older, with gray hair and tired eyes, but with the same look I remembered. He was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, simple, but so warm. I opened the door. He smiled uncertainly. "Hello," he said quietly. "Hello," I replied. We stood there, not knowing who would make the first move. Inside, everything was like it had been at the beginning: indecision, fear of rejection, and fear of acceptance. "I want to see her," he said, pointing to the room where our daughter was sleeping. "May I?" I nodded. He went in and stopped by the crib. The little girl was fast asleep, and next to her lay the very toy rabbit I had knitted myself. Tom sat down on the edge of the chair next to her. "She's so small," he whispered. "Have you kept her all this time?" "Yes," I replied, "and she's the greatest joy in my life." He took my hand. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything, for leaving, for being afraid, for being weak, for not being there." I looked into his eyes. "I'm scared too, but now we have her. And this is a new chance, a new path." Tom smiled for the first time in a long time. "I want to be a part of your life, if you'll have me." At that moment, our daughter woke up, opened her eyes, and looked at him. Her gaze was so clear and trusting that my heart almost broke. "This is our family," I said quietly. "Yes," Tom replied. "Family." The house gradually filled with life, the baby's laughter, quiet conversations, the sounds of dishes and footsteps. We were learning again, learning to be a family that was rebuilding itself to accept something new. Tom tried hard, though sometimes timidly. I forgave and endured, though it was difficult at times. Our daughter grew, and with her, our bond grew. Every morning began with smiles, and every evening with stories about the day. We cooked together, walked in the park, played with our little girl, trying not to think about the past. Instead, we built a present. One day, Tom said, "Thank you for not giving up. You are an incredible woman." I replied, "Thank you for coming back. That takes courage too." And we moved forward together, now as a family of 3. It was a quiet, warm summer evening. We sat in the garden, drinking mint tea and listening to the birds singing in the distance. Our daughter played with her grandmother, who is our heart and soul. Tom told funny stories from his childhood. I looked at them and thought how amazing life is, how it can turn around even when there seems to be no way out. I am not a young mother, but I am a mother, and that is the most important thing. We were together, and that was enough. The first years with my daughter were a real test for Tom and me, but at the same time the greatest happiness in our lives. Every day brought new discoveries, first smiles, first words, first steps. Tom and I tried to be there for her, doing everything we could to keep her warm and safe. Despite our age, we learned to play hide and seek again, read bedtime stories, and sing lullabies. My daughter grew up to be an amazingly curious and cheerful girl. She was like a little ray of sunshine in our home. She made us forget our worries and illnesses. Tom and I supported each other, sometimes arguing over little things, but always finding the strength to make up for her sake. His apologies and determination to be a good father made our relationship stronger. We understood that old age is not a death sentence when there is love and care. At first, our neighbors treated our unusual family with surprise and skepticism. Many whispered and judged, but gradually their attitude changed. When they saw how caring we were toward our daughter, how we went to the park together and organized little celebrations, respect came naturally. Some neighbors began to ask us for advice, and others simply smiled when they saw us on the street. Several years passed. The three of us became a real family, where everyone found their place. Tom became not just a husband and father, he became my rock and my friend. We often remembered the difficult moments, but we looked to the future with hope. Our daughter grew up confident that family is not just blood, but also love, support, and understanding. We taught her to be strong and kind, and she taught us to enjoy life again. Our neighbors stopped seeing us as unusual. We became part of their lives. Children's laughter in the street, shared holidays, help and support made our home the warmest in the neighborhood. I realized that age is just a number. The main thing is the heart that never stops loving and dreaming. And now, looking back, I know that we went through a lot, but we were able to keep the most precious thing, each other.